What you've just seen was done through the use of the Quantel DPB7000, better known as the Paintbox. The Paintbox is a video computer graphics system with such high resolution that the images it produces can look as lifelike as a photograph and as abstract as your imagination or your client will allow. It's the modern video equivalent of all the traditional tools available to graphic artists. The Paintbox is operated through an electronic stylus or pen. A simple motion of the pen displays the paint palette. The right side of the palette shows the pen's point size and color. The left side shows a collection of artist-selected colors. To create new colors, one simply mixes the existing colors. The Paintbox has the capability of recreating traditional painting techniques, such as the textured effect of charcoal or chalk. The use of airbrush mode will do everything a traditional airbrush does, except drip. In addition, the Paintbox has capabilities that conventional mediums don't have. For example, wash mode will alter the color of an area without affecting the underlying image. We'll get back to some of the other functions available in the Paint menu, but let's move on now to the Graphics menu. By using the various functions of this menu, geometric shapes can be easily created. A particularly useful feature is the ability to create rectangles which automatically blend between any two colors. When combined with other techniques, interesting backgrounds can be easily produced. For example, a gradated rectangle can be shaped through a stencil to produce a gradated triangle. The stencil can be easily reversed in order to change the background while protecting the triangle. The Library menu is the most straightforward of the five. Our system is configured for 2 hard disk drives, capable of storing over 500 pictures in digital form. There is also a floppy disk drive which can store an image onto an 8-inch diskette. The last menu, Paste Up, allows you to cut out and combine picture elements. It can also be used to produce type. Each Paintbox typeface can be easily adjusted to any size from 16 through 72 scan lines. A variety of settings allow for total typographic control. Once a line of type has been set, it is cut out and can be placed in any position with a wide variety of effects, such as outline, surround, solid, an embossed look, or a true drop shadow. One can even control the color, distance, and transparency of the shadow. All of these effects can be used with shapes, logos, and other cutouts which can be created by hand or through camera input. One of the things that really sets the Paintbox apart from most imaging systems is its ability to instantly input and then manipulate a still frame of full-color video. Any video image, either from camera or tape, can be captured or frozen without any noticeable loss of picture quality. Then, all the functions of the Paintbox can be used to alter the image. You can magnify an area of the picture in order to do detail work. Colors can be selected right from the picture itself, allowing for perfect retouching. In some cases, matching a color isn't enough. Complex patterns can be duplicated to produce the needed effect. The full potential of the cut and paste ability of the Paintbox quickly becomes apparent. By now, you've probably gotten the impression that the Paintbox can do just about anything with a still image. But what about animation? There are many ways the Paintbox can be used to create animated effects. One of the simplest is through the use of the long-awaited Paintbox animation package. To use it, you first cut out an area of the picture you wish to animate. The Paintbox automatically produces a series of cells. You can duplicate and move cells while keeping them in perfect registration. When the cells are completed, they are put in a stack. The stack is then replaced in the original image and run at any selected speed or sequence. By using the new Paste Over feature, a stack or any cutout may be digitally keyed over live video, allowing perfectly clean, soft-edged keys. Another feature of the animation package is that a sequence of activity can be stored in the Paintbox and replayed at various speeds. Editing opens up other possibilities as well. By creating keyframes and then dissolving or wiping between them, animated sequences are easily created. For more elaborate animation, the traditional frame-by-frame approach is necessary. The Paintbox's abilities make this approach as painless as possible, and the resolution gives results that rival film animation. A more electronic approach is to prepare objects for manipulation by the Mirage or other digital effects systems. Finally, the combination of live action with Paintbox imagery provides the electronic equivalent of glass matte painting. For example, in the Greg Kihn rock video Reunited, the widest possible shot of the Oz set was this. But through Paintbox, the set was made to appear much larger. The same technique was used in this program, and it could be used to expand the horizons of almost any production. We haven't covered everything, of course, but we hope that this brief demonstration has given you some idea of the wide range of possibilities that the Paintbox presents. The next step is really up to you.
When the sun goes down, Levi's coats come out. That's what the night is all about. When the sun goes down, there's a rainbow coming out. Yeah, Levi's coats. They make people say they're soft, warm, and sensual. They light up the night. The colors made for nocturnal moves. Levi's coats shining in the shadows. Levi's coats shining all around. Levi's coats, that's what the night is all about. Ooh. Levi's colors, Levi's coats.
Around the world, around the clock. It's BA Czech Corporation's sales force that makes things happen. In 160 countries around the globe, you are the source of our strength. These are the stories of people who reflect the talent that makes our whole sales force special. These are profiles in excellence.
My money fund investment account at Third National is a lot more than just checking. I earn substantial interest on all my money. Buying and selling stocks, bonds, and options over the phone is easy through Third National's discount brokerage. And I can personally direct the investments of my Third National IRA. So can you. So why go anywhere else? Make it easy. Make it Third.
Sunday is special. And Sunday has its own special Tribune.
Grandma, how would I look in this?
Different.
Look what's in the Sunday magazine.
That took nerve to write.
That took nerve to print.
Chicago's Sunday Best, the Tribune and Sunday Magazine.
It's a tribute to you, the Chicago Tribune.
The Pacific 10 Conference, comprised of the universities of Southern California, Oregon, California, Washington State, Arizona, Oregon State, UCLA, Arizona State, Washington, and Stanford. Unparalleled in athletic achievement and winner of more NCAA championships than any other conference, the Pacific 10 stretches from Arizona in the southwest north to California, Oregon, and Washington. Unsurpassed in academic excellence, Pac-10 schools have been providing the best in quality education for more than a century, offering degrees in agriculture, music, art, drama, and dance, as well as the sciences, including medicine, computer science, engineering, business, and law. The Pacific 10 Conference, leading America into the 21st century.
Will somebody kill that music? It's better. Hello, I'm Martin Holbrook, and I'd like to tell you something of the Quantel Paintbox. The Paintbox is controlled exactly as you would control traditional media. We have, effectively speaking, a pencil, except in this case it's an electronic pen, and a sheet of paper, which is in this case a tablet. And all the functions are controlled by those two elements. We don't have to learn computer programming, we don't have to understand computers at all. In fact, we're completely unaware that there's an electronic medium between us and the picture. The basis of graphics is, of course, drawing, the business of making marks on a sheet of paper, arranging elements on sheets of paper, photographs maybe, or illustrations. And in fact, what we've got here is a system now that allows us to do this straight into the television system without the degeneration associated with drawing on paper, as I say, and then having to place the paper in front of a television camera. So the whole Paintbox is devoted to the idea of producing those effects of graphic design without recourse to the traditional media. However, people are of course trained in using the traditional media, and it is the most natural form of producing, as I say, marks on sheets of paper. The screen in front of you, the blank screen, represents the basic sheet of paper of the system, and this is what I see on the monitor in front of me as I begin to draw. Now, if I bring the pencil or stylus within a quarter of an inch or so of the tablet, we see this yellow cross, which is, effectively speaking, my pencil point. And if I move my hand around on the tablet, you can see the pencil point naturally follows. Now, in order to draw, we clearly need a pencil or a brush and a colour loaded onto that brush. In order to do this, we simply move the cursor, as you see, gently out of the picture area towards the bottom, and this calls up a palette. Just that geographical movement calls up the palette. On the palette here we have a basic collection of primary colours on the left, a series of empty paint pots which I can load with colours which I may mix, and I mix the colours in this large white area at the bottom here, the palette itself. The column of 5 boxes on the right represent the brush size, so at the moment I have a black brush loaded, as you can see from this panel on the extreme right, and if I draw in the palette area, selecting different brush sizes, we can see the effect of those sizes. Also, we can see immediately that we have here an extremely naturalistic line. This in no way could this be described as a computer-generated line. This is scribbling. So if I do this on the sheet of paper itself, or the picture area, I simply remove the palette, bring the pen out into the picture, and begin to draw with it. As I say, producing an extremely naturalistic line. And the way it's naturalistic, or the means by which it's naturalistic, is, as you can see, that we have a pressure sensor. The harder I press, the more colour is deposited on the paper, on the screen rather. Just exactly as if it were a brush or a pencil. This works, of course, with all the brush sizes, so with a fine brush I can have a very hard pencil or a very soft one. If I load a second colour now, we'll try for light blue. By putting a second colour over the black, we can see that it's absolutely transparent until we begin to scrub it over, whereupon it becomes opaque. Or, of course, if I press hard, it's opaque anyway. An absolutely amazing illusion, really, because what you're looking at, you would, as I say, assume that you're looking at maybe a layout pad with somebody drawing on it. Very hard to believe that you've looked at an electronically processed image. Just load another brush, another colour now. It takes virtually no time at all to adapt to the head-up posture required, obviously, for drawing in this way. Now, I'm essentially speaking mixing colour. On the screen before us we have a whole variety of different blues, thousands of shades probably of grey and blue. And if we perform this function in the palette area, I can mix up colours, which, as I say, I can then dump in these pots and save away for future use. So, for example, supposing we wanted orange, which doesn't appear in the basic collection of primaries, I simply select yellow, place an area of yellow in the palette, pick up red, and just dust that colour over in varying intensities, exactly as I was doing with the blue here, using the pressure sensor in the pen. Where the two colours overlap, clearly we can see orange, and if we select an area by putting the cursor over that area, pressing down, I can pick up the resultant mixture, and immediately you can see that it's possible to produce a very large number of shades indeed. So mixing of paint is exactly parallel to the way in which one would mix wet, real paint on a palette. As I say, these colors can then be brought into the empty palette boxes and stored away for future use. Or indeed, they can be brought out into the picture area, drawn with, and so on. An interesting feature of the paint box is that any color displayed, when the palette is displayed, is capable of being loaded onto the pen. So supposing, for example, I wish to pick up this mixture of the two blues here, one simply presses down, removes the palette, one then has a perfect match to that blue. You'll appreciate, of course, that this means that when we take in, for example, a live color video image, it's possible to pick up colors from that image and retouch or repair video frames with the greatest of ease. So it becomes the most excellent retouching equipment. Now, to date, I've been using the basic paintbrush facility. Clearly, there are more facilities than this. For example, we may wish to change the type of brush, or we may wish to go on and take the image we've developed and assemble it, for example, into a graphic composition, or to caption it, or to combine it with other elements. In other words, to perform all those functions which a graphic designer is expected to do. Now, instead of my vertical movement of the cursor up and down to call up a palette, if I pull the cursor out to the left or right of the picture, I call up this display, which we call a menu. In fact, it's a list of 5 menus. The column on the left shows us the 5 basic groups of function in the system: painting, graphics, stencil, library, and paste up. Now you can see immediately that the menu display is very comprehensible. It's in a recognizable typeface. Its terminology is that of the studio rather than the engineer. It's a very logical, in fact the logic of it is impeccable for creative staff. And very shortly, when you've learned the basis of the machine, you find that you can move automatically between menu and menu without really any thought at all. Now we can see that painting here is illuminated pink, and this means that the 3 columns of type here are the painting menu. Now, I have here a column of 5 different types of brush. As I say, I've been using the basic paintbrush to date. The next one on the list here is wash. Now, if I select a color, we'll say green, you can see that the wash behaves in the same way as the basic paintbrush, in that the harder you press, the more color is deposited. But in this case, it always remains transparent, no matter how hard you press. So one is enabled to use the most beautiful colored inks, effectively speaking. You can still mix color on the screen, as you can see, and we have access to this absolutely stunning coloring medium. Next on the list here is airbrush. Now this very closely parallels the real airbrush. In fact, I now tend to regard it as the real airbrush because this is the one that doesn't spit or splutter. This is the one you can't clog, you can't bend the needle, and you get this absolutely perfect spray, just exactly like the traditional airbrush. And again, it will, of course, work in all the different sizes, and you'll find that the absence of the universal control on the airbrush is no hindrance at all, because the ability to change size very quickly is exactly parallel to the way in which one uses the airbrush. And this probably holds good for all the media in the paint box. Next on the list here is shade. This allows you to lighten or darken, obviously, the shade of any area of the picture without affecting the basic coloring beneath. So if I select a large brush, we can shade across an area, making that area lighter or darker, and still retaining the green, blue, and purple basic color underneath. Finally, in the list of different brushes, we have chalk. Now that's exactly what this is, a textured chalk. This really is absolutely marvelous. This is extremely popular with people who illustrate. It's a random texture and very much replicates the sort of effect you get by using a pencil, for example, or chalk on a textured paper. Also in this menu we have a number of color laboratory functions, color map and mosaic. I'll show you these when we have a picture displayed because it's more appropriate really. On the left here there are some drawing aids, for example magnify. If I select magnify by pressing down on the box, I produce this yellow rectangle which I can steer around the picture with my pen. By pressing down again, you'll see that the picture is magnified by a factor of 2. Now this is really a drawing aid. It allows you to, effectively speaking, get close to the paper, so that if we then select a brush, a very fine one let's say, and execute some extremely detailed and fine work using a fine brush, whatever it happens to be, when I then come to diminish the image again, we'll see that this brush has in fact been halved in size. There. So we are now able to do extremely detailed work at the very limit of the resolution of the system. Save picture is a temporary file, quite aside from the permanent library of the machine, which I'll come to when we consider the library menu. This file allows you to store an image temporarily as you go along and build it up, so that if you were to make, for example, a grievous error, you know that you can always go back to the stage at which you'd stored by pressing restore. This of course allows you to make selective judgments when you're building up a diagram or image. This more or less concludes the basic facilities of the painting menu. And you can see of course already that we have an extremely powerful freehand drawing capability. Virtually anything that can be done in the way of making, as I say, a mark on paper or a screen or an image can be done using the Paintbox. One of the great pluses of the Paintbox is that it removes a lot of the mechanical or physical constraints placed upon designers and artists. You no longer do you have to mix paint, sharpen pencils, seek colored papers. That physical function is now speeded up by a matter of maybe 200 or 300%. Finally in this menu is wipe canvas. Currently there's a grey panel to the right of the wipe canvas box. Should I put whatever colour I like in there, I can wipe the picture to that colour. So we'll have dark blue, select blue, some black, mix the two colours together to our satisfaction. Place the colour in the panel, press wipe canvas, and the screen is wiped to that colour. Obviously the temporarily saved image is there still underneath should we require it. I think the best way of looking at the Paintbox in terms of its general functional ability is to run through the menus more or less in order. So we've covered, as I say, the painting menu pretty fully. Moving down the list now we come to graphics. This really means geometry or mechanical drawing. As you see, the menu has now changed, giving me an option of lines and rectangles and so on. So if we wish to draw, for example, a straight line, we select separate lines here, brush size, a color. So I wish to draw a line from A here to B. We select the point A, press down with the pen, and we pull out this line, which I can extend in any direction, much in the way of a rubber band. Pull it out to position B. When we're satisfied with the position, press down again, and the line, as you can see, adopts the color and line thickness that I've selected. So we have, effectively speaking, an electric ruler. These lines can be constrained to the horizontal and the vertical only, should we wish, by selecting this panel here on the right. So if I now select a new color, if I wish to draw a vertical line in this area here, we tap down as before, pull out our line to near the vertical position, press down again, and the line will correct to the exact vertical or horizontal. Behaving, if you like, very much in the way of an electric T-square. Moving down the list again, connected lines, which as you see can also be horizontal and vertical if we desire. Connected lines are exactly the same in function as the separate lines. Select a color, thickness, tap down as before, pull out our line. The difference being between this and separate lines is when I confirm the line in that position now, I have tacked down the beginning of a new line connected to the end, so we can draw graphs and so on. Already you can see the strength of the system when it comes to drawing diagrams, bar charts, pie charts, and so on. Moving down the list, rectangles. There are three ways in which we can draw a rectangle, either as an outline, using, as we have here, a color and a line thickness, or as a solid block of color, or we can even graduate between one color and another from top to bottom. So in order, therefore, let us try to draw a rectangle as an outline. Select a color and a size. Press down. We've established one corner of the rectangle, which I can pull out on the diagonal opposite corner with my pen to whatever position we require. Once we're happy with the position, press down again, and as before, the rectangle adopts the relevant line thickness. Solid. Select a color, press down as before, and we pull out now a solid panel of color, again to the position we require, tack down again, and that is fixed in position. Finally, graduated. We can graduate, as I say, between two colors. The bottom color of the graduated area is represented by the color that I place in this panel here. We have a white color currently. Let's place a cream color. And then we'll take a dark purple, brown, mix a little red into it, blue. That colour that I've now loaded on the brush will form the top half of the graduation. We simply tack down a corner as before, pull out our rectangle to the position required, press down again, and the graduation is mathematically even over that area. This is excellent, for example, for creating graduated backgrounds. Supposing I wanted to graduate the screen from light dark blue at the top to white at the bottom, we simply place white on the brush, load that box, take the dark blue color, start at the top left-hand corner, pull out the rectangle to the bottom right-hand corner, press down, and the entire screen is graduated, as I say, mathematically perfect. Remaining in the menu here, now we have circles. Again, these can be outline or solid. The way in which I draw a circle, again, is to select a brush thickness and color. We now position the cursor on the center of the circle required, press down, and pull out a square which represents the diameter of the circle. A second pressure on the pen causes the circle to be drawn. If we select solid, behaves in exactly the same way, pull out the circle to the diameter required, press down, and it will fill up with the required color. Ellipses are drawn exactly the same way. We find a center, but instead of pulling out a square, obviously we'll pull out a rectangle of the same aspect ratio of the ellipse. So we select a color, press down for our center, position the rectangle to our satisfaction, press down again, and the ellipse is drawn. And again, this can be solid, as I say, in exactly the same way as the circle. Finally, in the graphics menu is fill. This is a fill routine for automatically filling areas of solid color. It's ideal if you have an irregular shape, for example, a map. We could, for example, fill this area with color here, simply by selecting that color and placing it in the area. The next menu in the list is stencil. Stencil requires a little explanation. Its main function is that of a masking medium, so the obvious analogy is to a masking film which you can apply to the picture to control areas of color with, for example, an airbrush. Its second use is as a means of cutting out selected areas of the picture. One can define an area with the stencil medium, and then in the paste up menu we'll find the ability to cut that out and position it into a graphic composition. The third use is to define priorities in the picture, that's to say foreground and background, which is obviously particularly useful when we look at the animation facilities of the Paintbox. convenient way of displaying those three uses is to draw a sphere and then manipulate it accordingly. So if I wish to draw a sphere on this blue background, clearly we could use or draw the stencil, so we select Draw. In the sub-menu here you can see that I can add or remove the plastic film analogy that I've referred to simply by hitting Wipe here. We have now covered the blue picture with a red, as I say, film or medium. If I now select Remove, we can cut into that back to the original blue background again. So in the exercise that we're going to undertake, the drawing of a sphere, obviously I want a circular hole in this red film. So we'll use the Graphics menu, Solid Circles, draw down, tap down for a center as before, select a diameter, press down, and cut a hole into the stencil medium. Right, we've now drawn the stencil, so the next function obviously is to use it. This is a good example of the logic of the menus that I mentioned earlier. The inappropriate boxes get turned off, more appropriate boxes get turned on as you work your way through the menu. It's very difficult to get lost and almost impossible to make a irreversible mistake in the Paintbox. Right, so we've now selected Use. To draw a sphere, I obviously want an airbrush, so we find that in the Painting menu. And we'll use a large white airbrush, so we need a large brush size and a white color. The stencil is now in use. And by using the airbrush to spray through that hole, we're using the mask and the stencil in precisely the way one would use more traditional forms of drawing medium. Now if we select black for the shadow, in an extremely short space of time we've created quite a tolerable sphere, probably in less time than it would take to find the scalpel blade to cut the hole in the masking film for the traditional method. Now I can use the stencil with other drawing media, for example the wash. We could recolor the sphere, so we select wash and we'll select a gold color, let's say. Simply dust the wash over the area of the stencil, and we can put the highlight back in using the airbrush. And you can see what an excellent and powerful drawing aid this is. One of the advantages over the Paintbox masking medium and more traditional methods is, of course, that paint doesn't build up or run under the edge. And furthermore, we can actually turn it over or invert it, for positive for negative. So if we go back to the stencil menu now, select Reverse Stencil, I can now use the stencil, as I say, in a negative sense, and we can put, for example, a halo around that sphere that I've drawn. So again, we select Use, the airbrush. Now we'll see that we have a perfect negative image of the stencil, which allows me to control the color the other way around. Or we could use the stencil, for example, with aspects of the Graphics menu to change the background color. Supposing we wanted our gold sphere on a black ground. If I went to Graphics, select Solid Rectangles, black. By tacking down one corner of the rectangle in the corner of the picture, I can now draw out black over the whole picture area and instantly change the color of the background. So as you can see, we have a very full means of controlling color in all its aspects using the stencil. Now the second use I mentioned was that of using it as a cutting out tool. So if we wanted to detach the sphere from the picture and position it, resize it into a composite image, we reverse the stencil again and now move from the stencil menu to the paste up menu. Now in the paste up menu you can see that we can cut and paste, and there are a number of other functions which I'll cover in a second, but cut is what we're interested in at the moment. So removing the menu then, I surround the ball with this yellow rectangle. When I press down to confirm the cut, all the area of the picture described by that rectangle will be removed from the picture, with the exception of those areas covered by stencil. So in this instance, obviously, we shall remove the sphere and the sphere only from the picture. So press down, the machine cuts out that picture. We select paste. I shall come to these sub-menus later on when we consider different ways of pasting things down. We'll turn the stencil off now. Coming out into the picture area again, you can see we've duplicated our sphere, and I now have it on the end of my pen, and I can position it anywhere I like. We simply press down to pick it up, position, press down with the stylus, and it's tacked down temporarily in position. I can pick it up again and reposition at will. Associated with the Paintbox workstation is a joystick unit which allows me to rotate a picture plane or to reduce the size of this cutout image. So if I pull the joystick towards me, the cutout sphere will shrink away down to infinity if need be, and back up again without any loss of quality. It is possible to size this cutout image accurately to within one television line if you require. So again, we can pick up the cutout image, position it, and stick it in position. Whereupon, of course, we have another one, and so on and so on. It was this ability to cut out and move objects for positioning into graphic composition that led us to consider animation, because what we have here is a live television picture, which we can, of course, record if we require. The first thing we considered was the ability to teach the machine how to memorize a movement such as this, so that we could build sequences of moving pictures. And in fact, the Paintbox does contain exactly this feature. It's the equivalent, if you like, of a VT system, except that it's in the Paintbox disk storage. You can record, you can play back at different speeds. We have a very full edit function. We can set tags and cue points and remove unnecessary material and assemble groups of sequences together, saving them in the library as required. The other half of the animation package, which I shall come to shortly, allows one to take the cutout image, for example, this small ball that we've been moving around, and to treat that cutout image as the first in a series of cells, which we can then work upon in succession in the normal way, and then play back in a cycling animation on the end of our pen as required. So that when we come, for example, to look at the third use of the stencil, which is defining foreground and background in a picture, we could take the cycling small object and move it in and out of areas of background and foreground of the picture, creating extremely complex animation sequences. Now, this third use of the stencil can be demonstrated by moving the ball around the picture. Here we can see it's obviously in the foreground. If I go back to the stencil menu, however, reversing the stencil and placing it back in use, whereas the ball is clearly in the foreground here, we can actually now make it go behind there, which, when you think about it, is an extremely strange and powerful effect. So that if we were to design the stencil to suit our desired animation function, for example, if I wish to get this small sphere to orbit around the large one, if we were to design the stencils accordingly, you can achieve some really quite extraordinary and bizarre effects. So if I were to remove an area of that stencil, let us say the bottom half, like so, place the stencil back in use. Our small sphere is still in the foreground here and here, but now we can actually get it to go behind there. So it really needs just a little imagination, and suddenly one's apparently straightforward and simple flat art graphics system becomes an extremely powerful animation tool as well. The one menu that we haven't considered so far in the Paintbox is that of the library. The library obviously allows us to find or save various elements, a picture obviously. The standard Paintbox configuration has a single fixed disk which allows us to store something of the order of 150 to 200 pictures. Obviously, this can be extended as required, and there are further facilities that allow the taking off of individual pictures as floppy disks, or of offloading digital information onto tape. As well as pictures, we can store stencils, obviously, and pictures and stencils in combination. So, for example, the two elements that comprise this orbit feature, the picture of the sphere and its associated stencil, can be stored in the library in perfect pin register. The small orbiting sphere could also be described as a cutout and saved in the library accordingly. Text font. This is where we keep the very extensive type library of the Paintbox, and later we'll show you how you can use that type library for captioning and titling. Palette. Earlier on I described how we could save away individual palettes and call them back for example, news or weather purposes. Overlay. Any picture can be recalled or expressed as an overlay. This is a transparent rendering of the picture and is extremely useful when you're using the machine for full frame cell animation, so you can refer back to the previous frame. As the overlay is in fact a stencil, you can also use the picture therefore in the manner of a silk screen, being able to squeegee or spray colour through it. Grid. This is a mathematical grid which can be described in a number of ways and used to control either the graphics menu, for example in the construction of bar charts or graphs, or with the typographic facility for creating baseline and margin for positioning of type. Sequence and sequence insert refer to the recorded sequence which I mentioned earlier. Insert being the ability, as I say, to assemble different sequences together. Stack refers to the cycling animation, which again I shall show you in a moment. But if we move to, for example, picture, we select Find Picture. This displays a small keyboard for us, which I can use to define the name or title of the picture we're looking for. So we simply define the title we're looking for, or sufficient of it to identify it. In this case, Demo. Press End, which is the executive command. And the Paintbox now begins to search its disk memory for the pictures containing that keyword demo. Here are the first 12 titles in the index containing that word. Clearly there are more than 12 because the menu invites me to go down should I wish. If I wish to select a picture, one simply aims the cursor over the relevant title, presses down, and the picture is displayed. Many of the pictures that we will show you in just now have been created on the Paintbox itself. For example, this is an illustration using the painting facilities that we examined earlier. You can see the clouds are largely comprised of chalk, and the rest of the picture is largely using the basic paintbrush. This is a very good example of the sort of artistic and realistic effects that one can achieve painting on the Paintbox. Very hard to believe, again, that you're looking at an electronically generated image. We can go back to the titles. We can even browse through these 12 images in miniature to see, or to remind ourselves what they look like. Again, selection of a picture simply by positioning the cursor over the relevant picture, pressing down, and the picture is displayed. This is another illustration on the Paintbox based on photographic reference, but there was no artificial means of transferring that image into the picture. There's no tracing. It's just a freehand drawing based, as I say, on the photographic evidence. Again, I think it gives a very good impression of the sensitivity and power of the Paintbox as an illustrating medium. To set against that, the Paintbox is an extremely powerful graphic tool. You can do extremely hard-edged and controlled diagrammatic work. Again, painting on the system, entirely freehand. As I think I said earlier, one of the great pluses of the Paintbox is the speed at which you can work. This particular illustration was executed in a matter of 20 or 25 minutes from scratch without reference. I think it'd be very hard put to do that by more traditional methods. One aspect of the Paintbox we haven't considered is the cycling animation. A good way of demonstrating this would be to find a background I've already created from the Paintbox, a typographic one, let's say, and see if we can get the lettering to cycle color, to flash for us. So again, I identify the picture I'm after by title. The machine finds all the pictures, in this case with a title beginning with Q, and we call up the background. As I've said, the way in which we construct a cycling animation is to take a basic element, to cut it out and to treat it as the first in a series of cells which we can then process. Now, I've already done that with this image, so if I look for that set of cells in the library, the machine calls down the set of cells, and I can display those simply by going into the Paste Up menu again and selecting this Animate box, from which we can see there are a number of functions which I can apply to the basic image. I'll just show the cells which I've constructed. And there they are. Now, as you can see, I've taken the basic letter form and successfully colored each of the letters with a different tone of blue. If I now make a stack of those, I can cause the color to cycle through the lettering, which we can then place over the basic background and achieve an animated effect. And the way in which I make a stack, select Make Stack, select the first picture. Here we see we have a time signature applied to the cell in question. I simply use the joystick to decide how many frames I want to display the cell for, press down again and confirm it in the stack. I then do that in succession for the rest of the cells. This stack, which has now been constructed, can be cycled at any speed or in a number of different ways. So if I ask to cycle the stack, we can see that it can be cycled as a single shot, as a reverse, or as a loop at any speed. So if we select loop, and using the joystick to advance these numbers, a fast speed of 70 frames per second. We'll call back the background now. And we can call down those cycling frames to position over the background. Now I position, and we can cycle that at any speed. The same would apply, of course, to any, for example, cartoon figure, or virtually any moving object. Well, that's that. Hard to get happy after that. I think I saw Pepper coming in. I think I better leave her to tell you about type. I've got work to do.
I'm glad I stopped by because I did want to be able to talk to you about the type on the Paintbox. I think that everyone's probably known that we've had type, as in a group of beautiful letters, but we've spent a lot of time working on it, and now we're able to offer typography. So you must speak about type in conjunction with typography. I think that simply means that now there's a beautiful group of letters available on the Paintbox. There's always been a beautiful resolution or high resolution of the letter forms, but letters exist in relationship to other letters. And now a typographer can sit down, and it's as close as you can come to sort of plugging in a Paintbox and thinking how you want the type to appear. It's very, very simple to accomplish things that you want typographically. Shall we have a look? First of all, we're now able to, when you go off into the library and look for a typeface, you're able to find a text font and simply ask for a listing of it. And now one is able to ask for browse as well. So you can take just sort of a brief little preview of what the faces might look like. So, to select a typeface, it's simply a matter of perhaps browsing down, finding one specific one that you want, touch down, paste up, and go to text. Now, the first thing that you'll probably notice is that we do have a keyboard. It's a mini keyboard, and if you want to at this point, you could use a bona fide keyboard. So if you type and you want to use it and you feel comfortable with that, you may. But we've worked it out so that if you just want to use a stylus, you can use it that. Right, so we've got caps, lowercase, and other pi characters that you need. And the first two important boxes on here you'll see is height and kern. Now, let me just type out a few letters here. And what you're able to do very quickly is to decide on the actual height of the letters. And I go to the joystick and leave it depressed to 72 lines, which is the maximum height of the type. If I change it, I can go down to 16. It won't take quite that long to go down to 16, but you can see quite clearly that you're moving back and forth in whatever size. The kern box will allow you to change spacing between the letter forms. So if I touch minus units, it scrunches it up. And if I place this number into a positive situation, it will open it up and put a lot of space between them. So let me come back to just sort of 0 unit, which is analogous to hot metal spacing. And I think I want to have a little bit larger type. Go for 72. And let's set a word, compose a word, I guess. Okay, I have the letters up there that I want. The next thing I can do is to be able to edit those letters, because my idea of typography is going to be different from yours, and we know that if you have 18 typographers in a room, no one will agree. So we want to make it very simple for people to be able to change and make happen exactly what they want. Now, for example, I'm not terribly happy with the spacing between the cap B and I. So if I touch on the I, go to kern, and just remove a few units of space between those two letter forms, that's exactly what I can do. If I wanted to change the height of any of these letter forms, again, I can accomplish that by moving the joystick, making that smaller or larger. If I move over here and touch tumble, for example, I've just taken that letter form and dropped it down, but it's in its same position. Or if I touch flip and tumble, or just flip, I'm going to get a very interesting sort of logo. So I'll tighten that up a bit. And again, remembering I can overlap letter forms if I want. Okay. So with this ability to change the height and the kerning, the space between individual letter forms, as well as a jump, a baseline jump, if you will, you can very quickly create superiors, inferiors, fractions, and strange and wonderful logos. So I'm happy with that. I will simply say cut text, swipe off, and I now have this to move about the screen where I want. At this point, as you well know, if I touch stick, that burnishes into place, and I can go off and choose another color and lay that over it. However, there's 5 new functions with sort of to vary the look of the face that you've just cut, or the bit of text, or the line of type, in fact. So if I choose outline and press down, it will give me an outline of that typeface showing the artwork behind it. If I don't want to see that, I can use the surround box, put a color in the box, choose another color perhaps, touch down, and I have one color on the interior and a color as a surround. Now if I go to solid, now we're talking about solid drop shadow, and several other little boxes over here appear. And the first one is the units, and I can decide on how thick a drop shadow I actually want. If I use the cursor to change the direction, I can decide where I want the shadow dropping from, and I'm able to decide what color shadow I have there. So we'll use black with a white outline top and stick, and you can see it moves down in that direction. Now, if I go to a drop shadow, another box appears, and it allows me to decide on the percentage of the shadow itself. So we'll use the same parameters of the other, but now I have an effect that is not unlike having a pane of glass between the actual type and the shadow itself. Embossed like this a lot. If you touch stick, and when you have the embossed key pressed, it pushes it through the paper. It looks exactly like you've just embossed the type, and you can use the little joystick and the arrow, the directional arrow, to decide on where the light source is coming from. Right. Using this biggles that I have created here, if I cut that with a stencil, so I can take my type and cut through on the stencil, and then use the stencil, and then go into perhaps an airbrush. Get some very interesting airbrush effects along here. I won't go through all that, but having created this lovely airbrushed biggles, we could go off to the library, find a series of type, and I think very quickly show you that, for example, a final product where we've flipped the G's, created a rather interesting logo, airbrushed, used the drop shadow to give it the effect that there's an actual light source and a cloud, and therefore a shadow on the back of this billboard. Now I've prepared several different exercises using different type and different type forms and some of the typographic effects and features you can use on the Paintbox. So let's just have a look at that. First one just exhibits using perhaps a Gill Sans and an American writer in twisting and turning the different lines of type. Here it seemed quite appropriate to use a very bucolic scene, use the embossed type, cut that out, start moving that about, using another drop shadow to create the fact that you've got a stack of postcards there. The calligraphic effect. If you are a calligrapher, I think that's fantastic, but if you happen not to be, I think I can show you how very quickly you can achieve some very interesting results. You start off with the stencil and just write that. Cut the shape of that out. And position your cutout on the screen, but then ask for a solid drop shadow in one direction or another. Perhaps a little experimenting will give you the best aspect ratio, if that's proper. And you can get a very interesting calligraphic effect with that. Right. Now, meanwhile, back to browse. I think it's quite effective to, in fact, cut type into the stencil because you're able to get some interesting background shadows, but you can also try different colors and different effects, and in fact rearrange the type round on the page quite quickly and effectively. This one, again, using the stencil, just cutting into it with your own handwriting and using that cutout. One can also use all the different 5 effects that you can do with type with it as a cutout as well. Aha, my contribution to punk typography. We have using the graduated rectangle that I'm sure Martin has talked about, and also the lines of airbrushing to give it this fuzzy neon effect. And then the individual letters were applied a la press type fashion to create this rather interesting free-form floating Boy George here. This I think is an important one because obviously people are going to spend a lot of time composing type, but it's no good unless you have a framework, a stencil, a grid in the background to be able to arrange the type on the page. So what we've been able to do is off under stencil here, we have a use grid, and it says define grid, and you're able to precisely decide how many columns you want across the page as well as how many rows, therefore setting up your own grid. And I think again I can show you how you can very quickly go off to the library, find a cutout, and let's say you had, I don't know, 5 or 6 lines of type, maybe a quote of 35 words. You can compose that, carefully save that away as cutouts, and then bring them back and arrange them on the page. Especially if you've numbered them correctly, this helps a lot. So we'll bring that out, place that there, touch stick, back to the library, pick up the second title, bring that out, third title, and so on. So I think you can quickly see that you can arrange this perfectly using this grid, because of course you can turn on the horizontal or the vertical or have everything on so that it's all flush, either left, right, or center as well. Really, for the first time, people are able to see what they want, work back and forth with this piece of equipment, and very quickly visualize what's up here. And that just, there's no piece of equipment like that. It just hasn't happened. This is the first time that a designer doesn't have to go back and forth with the typographer 3 or 4 tries until either the money or the time runs out, and you say, oh, okay, I've got to go with that. Should you have pre-prepared artwork that you wish to input into the Paintbox and manipulate, you can in fact use a feature that's called Color Map. Now in this instance, what we have here is we've cameraed in a particular piece of artwork, happens to be the Paintbox Quantel logo, on artboard, touched down, simply captured that, saved it into the Paintbox, and we can now use this Color Map facility, which will reduce your artwork to an elemental black and white. Now from there, you can use the stencil and the cutout facilities to take that logo and start moving around to have different sizes or to change the color, as I can show you now, I think. So there's the original bit of artwork on artboard in the upper right-hand corner, and we can start changing colors, changing backgrounds. So an effective use of the color map to clean up and manipulate artwork that you have already prepared. The color map feature isn't restricted to using cameraed-in artwork to play about with logos and redesign things. You can, in fact, use it to good advantage in making a solarized or a posterized picture. It simply depends on the number of colors and what order you place them in the palette. Now here we have a picture that was simply camera it in, again, stopping video. And when you place several different colors in the palette and touch color map, you can get a very interesting posterized, or as I said, solarized effect. With the Paintbox, and especially with the typography package, you can try quite a few design solutions, have a look, and say, oh, that's it. And you can accomplish that, the designer can accomplish that, as opposed to trying to direct the efforts of other people. So I think for the first time, that's probably the most important aspect of this. It doesn't exist anywhere else in the world. All the letter forms, all the faces, all the typefaces that we have on the Paintbox are licensed. We feel that that gives you the latitude to feel very comfortable about using them because they're legally yours to use. And also because they're licensed, it means that we've gone to the original supplier, the type foundries in many cases, gotten the original typeface or the original typeface digital information, and we've used that to convert to Paintbox fonts. So the faces that you're used to seeing and used to using now are the same ones that are going to be on this box. So they're legal and they're beautiful. What could be better? People will be able to find out how many faces we have available at any one time by talking to the face. If there is a face that you specifically need or want, we'd be very interested to know what that is and turn the box for you.